guys, OG of the HRC here, and I have a question for you guys. What is your favorite political movie of all time? I know, tough, because you've got thriller political movies, you got historical political movies, you've got comedy political movies, you got satires, you got romantic comedies, a ton. Well, you're in luck today. I'm going to tell you my personal top 5 political movies of all time. Okay, number 5 for top 5 political movies of all time is Dave. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it. It's a romantic comedy. It's starring Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver. What's not to love about that duo? Sigourney Weaver alone is always worth a second look, right? It's a simple story about Kevin Kline's character owns a temp agency. He's a good man. He just happens to look exactly like the President of the United States. The government hires him to sort of be a stand-in while the president is off doing God knows what with God knows who. And the president has a stroke. So, of course, enter in Kevin Kline's main character coming in and having to literally be the President of the United States without the country knowing. Now, what's interesting about this movie is on the surface, it's a cute romantic comedy. You have this interaction between Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver. She's the first lady, of course, and she doesn't necessarily have the best relationship with her actual husband, the president, and there's this divide between them. But then the new president comes, Kevin Kline, and sort of interesting things happen. So you have that at the basis. But under it all, you have a story about the questions of what the government is capable of doing without the American person knowing. It's far-fetched by many means, but there's one scene in particular where Kevin Kline has his best friend come to the White House to try to do a new budget because Sigourney Weaver's character wants his homeless shelter. And he comes and he's a regular accountant, regular guy, and he comes and he says, "Who's doing your books? This is crazy. If I ran my business like this, I'd be out of business." And that's so telling still to this day, as we've seen recently with stimulus packages and how bailouts and things like that, of how destructive our budgets, how destructive the federal government can be at times. So, like I said, on the surface, you have this really cute story of a good guy becoming president and doing really good things.
From today, I'm going to make it the responsibility of this government to find a job for every American who wants one. If you've ever seen the look on somebody's face the day that they finally get a job, I've had some experience with this. They look like they could fly. And it's not about the paycheck, it's about respect. It's about looking in the mirror and knowing that you've done something valuable with your day. And if one person can start to feel that way, and then another person, then pretty soon all these other problems that we're facing may not seem so impossible.
And you have Sigourney Weaver as like a bonus, but then you go a little bit deeper, like I said, and there's so much more there. It's aged very well. It's a cute story. You if you love DC, you see they filmed a lot of it in DC. So overall, it just makes me feel good. It makes me feel like, oh, it'd be so great if like the president was the good one, and not necessarily the bad one all the time. And it's interesting. It's also interesting because that actually happened. Not that they switched, but Woodrow Wilson in his second term had a bad stroke, and his wife the rumor is that his wife ran the country, Edith Galt. And so you never know what your government's capable of doing. But it's a fun, feel-good movie. It's a great movie to watch, when it's raining outside and you're looking. So that's my number 5 is Dave. It just makes me feel good. And I love to feel good, especially in terms of politics these days. So check it out. Okay, number 4, I'm going to give you guys some clues before I tell you. It stars a woman who's been nominated multiple times for Oscars, never has won. It stars a man who has won an Oscar. It's based off of a true story. The story that it's based off it is pretty recent, last 20 years or so. It is about a man who has been in politics for many, many years. Did you guess it? It's Vice. Vice is my number 4 all-time best political movies. It is brilliantly written. It is brilliantly directed. It is brilliantly acted. It stars Christian Bale and Amy Adams, my girl. And it is something that even if a quarter of it is true, oh man. Oh man, oh man. So overall, it follows Dick Cheney's life, political life, on before he was a somebody all the way to the end of the W. Bush administration. It covers all the in-between, how he gained power, lost power, gained it back, how he became W. Bush's vice presidential pick. All of that is covered in this movie. Christian Bale gained about 46 pounds to take on the role. He becomes so much like Dick Cheney that it becomes uncomfortable at times to watch, because Dick Cheney is not known for being a warm and fuzzy guy. Amy Adams as his wife, Lynn Cheney, is so brilliant because it exposes their relationship and how it wasn't just him who was obsessed with power, it was also her.
I can't go to a big Ivy League school, and I can't run a company or be mayor. That's just the way the world is for a girl. I need you. And right now, you are a big, fat, piss-soaked zero.
And then later on, their daughter, who's the congresswoman now, Liz Cheney. An interesting interaction happens within their family. I don't want to give too much away, but I would say to everyone, watch it. It'll leave you speechless. It can possibly leave you angry if you believe in everything that they say. I mean, you have in it, Tyler Perry as Colin Powell. You have Steve Carell. It's just brilliant. And I don't think I'll ever watch it again, but it still made my list because it left such an impact. It's just one of those movies, like Schindler's List, or that it leaves this impact and you're like, okay, I'm good. I got what I needed to get from it, but I don't ever want to see this again because there's such a discomfort, but still brilliant at the same time. So Vice is easily my number 4 best political movies of all time. Okay, number 3, I would almost guarantee you that you haven't seen this movie. And if you have, kudos. I actually hadn't seen this movie until a few years ago, and I thought to myself, how did I never see this movie? It is so relevant to what is happening right now in our political system, it blows my mind. Even though it came out in 1957, and it's a black and white movie, and it's starring Andy Griffith, as in that Andy Griffith.
The Andy Griffith Show.
And Patricia Neal, who's always brilliant and always underrated. It takes place, like I said, in 1957. It's a basic story overall, but so complex, if that makes sense. So basically takes place where Andy Griffith's character is in jail, and Patricia Neal's character, she's sort of a journalist, radio announcer, that sort of very above the times, by the way. But so they sort of build this friendship. He kind of sings and does this like dance and wiggle and a giggle, I guess you can say, in the jail. And next thing you know, he's rising in power.
This whole country just like my flock of sheep.
And this power is based on nothing, is all a lie. It's a fraud. There's nothing. He's sort of selling that he's this regular man and he knows the struggle and he's real and he's not. He's a fraud. And it gets all the way to the point where this guy from jail gets so much social influence that there's men coming to him and asking him for presidential candidate advice.
Marcia, you just wait and see. I'm gonna be the power behind the president and you'll be the power behind me.
And again, he's a fraud. He has no political background. He has no education. He has nothing. It's all a lie. But yet he gains all of this social power. And they just give it to him. And people sort of flock to him thinking that he's a messiah in a way. And he's not. It's all a lie. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about any of it. He cares, at the end of the day, he cares about himself. He doesn't care about the impression that he's making or the difference or any of that. Does that sound familiar? I know, a little too relevant these days. So I highly recommend A Face in the Crowd. It's on Turner Classic Movies. pretty often, especially these days. I wonder why. And just check it out. I don't know if it's streaming, I don't know if it's, but check it out. It is so relevant to today, and it breaks my heart that more people didn't pay attention to what these filmmakers saw in the 50s, what potentially could happen if we glamorize and we push someone to power who doesn't deserve to be there. Okay, so for my number 2, I have gone back and forth multiple times, no joke, between number 2 and number 1, because I love these movies both so much, but for such different reasons. So this is where I've landed. I have a right to change my mind, right? But in all seriousness, The American President, starring Michael Douglas and Annette Bening, is my number 2. I am so in love with this movie. I have seen it, and I'm not exaggerating, over 1,000 times. I watch it every single time it's on a movie channel. I own it. I can't. The first time I saw it, I think I watched it like 4 or 5 days in a row. It just makes me feel so good. It makes me think that, oh, that's how, like, when you have a cool president, things can run, because it's based on the president of the United States, played by Michael Douglas, falls in love with a lobbyist, Annette Bening, and it tells the story of how do you date when you're the president of the United States and you're falling in love, not just with anyone, but a lobbyist. So there's your twist. There's your Aaron Sorkin twist. And, how do you manage that? His approval ratings are through the roof when he first meets Annette Bening. And then, of course, he meets her, starts dating her publicly, and his approval ratings just tank. And the funny thing is like, nothing's changed. He's still exactly the same man who's raising his daughter on his own, who's been widowed, who's running the country in a great direction. Nothing's changed except for Annette Bening, who's her character is a phenomenal woman who works for, she's a lobbyist for only good things. So like the environment and teachers, and she put herself through school, and you learn all this in the movie. But so it's a great movie, and it's how do you date when you're the president? I feel like it's this just amazing movie that makes you feel so good. And Michael Douglas, his character, gives one of the best presidential speeches that I've ever seen in movies and television.
If you want to talk about character and American values, fine. Just tell me where and when, and I'll show up. This is a time for serious people, Bob, and your 15 minutes are up. My name is Andrew Shepard, and I am the president.
And of course, it's Aaron Sorkin, and like this is his bread and butter. The genius behind The West Wing. Like, this movie has such a feeling of The West Wing. It's like The American President airs Aaron Sorkin's like AAA version of The West Wing, and then he jumps into the majors with The West Wing and just like blows us all away.
Well, you may be mistaking this for your monthly meeting of the Ignorant Tight-Ass Club. In this building, when the president stands, nobody sits.
But this movie is so much like The West Wing. I say all the time, the only difference is that Martin Sheen is the chief of staff and Michael Douglas is the president. And that's like literally, for the most part, everything else feels like they're banter with each other, they're quick comebacks, what's interesting about that Michael Douglas speech is that I see it constantly when we get closer to Election Day, and that's how powerful that speech is. So that speech alone is worth seeing that movie, but you're going to fall in love with it. I don't know anyone who's ever seen it and they're like, oh, I wish I want that hour and a half back in my life. It's great. I mean, who doesn't love Annette Bening? Who doesn't love Michael Douglas? Who doesn't love Martin Sheen? I mean, who doesn't love a good political Aaron Sorkin? If you are a fan of The West Wing, you have to see this movie. I can't believe you haven't seen it if you are a fan of Aaron Sorkin, if you're a fan of The West Wing, but no judgment. But in all seriousness, it just makes me feel so good. And I can recite it right now if you guys really want me to. Hi, I'm Sydney Allen Wade. I'm from Virginia. I'm here to see Mr. McInerney. He doesn't need to know that. Oh, sorry. This is my first time at the White House. I'm just trying to savor that Capra-esque quality. He doesn't know who that is. Sure, I do. Frank Capra, great American director. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It's a Wonderful Life. Sydney Allen Wade from Virginia. Knock 'em dead. I mean, hello. Genius. Okay, and the number one movie of my personal top 5 political movies of all times. Drum roll, please. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Came out in 1939, so quite some time ago, but it is still so extremely relevant to our political system as we stand today in 2020. How sad is that? It is directed by the great American director Frank Capra, who had directed It's a Wonderful Life, which you may know, every Christmas Eve, the ultimate American story. Stars Jimmy Stewart and Jean Arthur. Jimmy Stewart gives an amazing performance as a simpleton guy who gets handpicked to be senator, and he takes his simpleton kind of good man vibes to Washington, D.C., and they have no idea what to do with him. So they try to manipulate him and control him, and he can't be controlled because he really is a good man. Jean Arthur, she works on the Hill. She works for different people, and she sort of doesn't believe in Jimmy Stewart in the beginning, and over time he sort of woos her, not necessarily in a romantic way, but in a true believer kind of way. And what I love about this movie is that Jean Arthur has this sort of powerful role, and it's 1939, and women in politics really had limited roles. So I hats off to Frank Capra for doing that, because I love every aspect of her character. Jimmy Stewart, he ends up doing a filibuster, and we're talking about filibusters back in the day when they used to do filibusters for days on it. Not this like, tag, come help me, I have to go to the bathroom. No, like you literally stood there and you fought for what you believed in, and his character does this, and it just turns into this never-ending sort of battle, and he loses his voice, and he gives one of these great political speeches in movie history, and it makes me cry every single time, and I've seen it so many times.
There's no place out there for graft, or greed, or lies, or compromise with human liberties. And if that's what the grown-ups have done with this world that was given to them, then we better get those boys' camps started fast and see what the kids can do.
It also makes me feel like, being a true believer, it may be really, really hard work, but it's worth it. I consider myself a true believer in what I believe in the political system and whom I believe in. But I think watching this movie, I'm like, okay, it's tough, but if you know what's right in your heart and you're doing what's right in your heart, then you'll be okay. And that's what this movie, to me, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, is about. And I just think that every single American should see this movie. I don't care if you're young, if you're old, see this movie. Because during these really confusing partisan times that we're currently going through, we can all be reminded that we're stronger when we're together, and we're stronger when we all believe in something bigger than ourselves. And that's what Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is about. Believing in something that's bigger than yourself, no matter the cost. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. But to re-wrap, number 5 was Dave. Number 4 was Vice. Number 3 was The Face in the Crowd. Number 2 was The American President, and number 1 was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Make sure you check all those videos out. If you like what you heard, make sure and push the subscribe button. Also, check us out on iTunes, Spotify, and of course here on YouTube. Until next time, the OG of HRC, signing out.